Today I want to give way too much of my time and yours to force touching onside kick that could have gone either way unless you're paying attention in Oklahoma versus Kansas State and all that's coming up after the bumper.
Don't be cornering me. Hold up. Time. You gotta help me with that corner shit.
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always OU related, college football related, sports related. We have a good time. Today, we are going to talk more about force touching and the onside kick at the end of the game. Oklahoma's lost to Kansas State 48-41. I'm going to go ahead and just get this out of the way. I'm only doing this because I was asked my opinion about this. And I try to give the old college effort whenever I'm asked my opinion about things that I could really care less about. Because as I see it, Kansas State soundly beat down Oklahoma, my Oklahoma. Beat them like they stole something. Mollywopped them, skull dragged them, picked up the 2x4 and hit them between the eyes. However, at the end of the game, there are folks that still believe Oklahoma was robbed. I don't live in that particular part of conspiracy theoryville, but we are going to walk through this, and we're going to walk through this together, all right? Now, following the game, the official in charge gave a statement to the pool reporter about force touching and whether or not it had occurred. Now, going to get into why that pool reporter's question was a little off topic and a little out of line, but first I want to give a good reading of what the rule was as it regards force touching, right? So the rule is Rule 2-11-4-C. Force touching results when a player's contact with the ball is due to an opponent blocking him into or the ball being batted or illegally kicked into him by an opponent. If the touching is forced, the player in question by rule has not touched the ball. All right. Now, there's force touching, but it doesn't even apply here. And to get there, let's start by listening to what the Big 12's coordinator for football officials, Greg Burks, had to say in the Big 12 teleconference on Monday morning when everybody wanted to know, was there force touching? What was going on? How did this ball end up in Kansas State's hands when it looks to Joe Blow OU fan like Trajan Bridges was blocked into the ball 1 yard before it legally had traveled far enough to be eligible for recovery by Oklahoma, which would have been if it traveled 10 yards, didn't travel 10 yards. We know how this ends. So let's listen to Greg Burks now.
I want to make clear that on this play, what replay can look at by rule is the timing of blocks by K, Oklahoma, and touching of the ball by K, Oklahoma. On this play, the ruling on the field was there was no touch and that the ball was recovered by Oklahoma. Replay then reviewed and ruled that Oklahoma touched the ball at 9 yards. They are not eligible to touch the ball until it's gone 10 yards. And so the ruling in after the review was to award the ball to Kansas State at 44. I know there's been discussion about force touching, but I want to clarify that if you don't have a touch ruled on the field, you obviously can't have forced touching. And even if you did, the question of forced touching is not something that falls under the replay review guidelines.
Okay, so there's that, right? Now, here's a good question as to, hey, Greg, we know that you can't review forced touching, but was there forced touching?
Generally, we don't talk about judgment, but after having this conversation with Rogers Redding, the national coordinator, I do not believe there was forced touching on this play. The rule book talks about engaged and blocked into. As officials, what we discussed is active and passive. If a player is actively involved in a block and is touched by the ball, that is not considered to be forced touching. The additional contact by the second Oklahoma player on this play, all of those things went together that had we ruled touching, I don't believe we would have had forced touching. But I want to reiterate, whether we would or wouldn't, that is not something that's reviewable. We can only review the touch.
Negative. No, there wasn't. And then there's this really interesting exchange with Greg Burks and, well, Hoove about who's doing what and how. And I'm going to summarize that because it's just way too long and it was a stupid amount of time, and I understand who was getting after, but I'm going to summarize the points. He wanted to know who was talking to Reggie when they were doing this replay that took twice as long as it normally should take. And it was Greg Burks himself. There's also another replay official who was live at the game, as there's a replay official at every single Big 12 game, right? He is coordinating them in Dallas. So you essentially have 3 sets of eyes on this thing, 2 of which are directly involved in the game at present, and 1 of which is overseeing all that stuff. That is Greg Burks. And Greg Burks was actually asked to come in on this, and they want to make sure that they got this right. But first, there's replay official at OU versus Kansas State, 1. 2, the referee is watching the play, but he's also getting input from the replay official and the Big 12 coordinator for officials if necessary, and it was necessary in this play. And last here, there was an explanation as to why this pool reporter's question was off, right? And actually, I am going to let you listen to that part because I think that's really important to get across here, and how as journalists, as hot takers, as whatever it is you want to call your favorite sports media person, we do have a responsibility to ask good and accurate and knowledgeable questions, especially since we're going to put these guys on the hot spot more often than not. Here's that.
So the forced touching is not reviewable, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so Reggie Smith said to the pool reporter after the game, he said that he considered all aspects of forced touching. He did not mention whether it was viewable. He quoted the rule on forced touching and said that was the primary determination for considering forced touching. Are those two things incongruent? Should he have said forced touching?
Yeah. Yes, but he was responding. The pool reporter's question was about forced touching.
Mm-hmm.
So we responded to the pool reporter's question and quoted the rule, which is 211.4, about forced touching. What should have been asked was, is that reviewable? And what is reviewable on the kick, which is a different question. So it's a little bit out of line, but I think we leave it up to the media to figure out what question they want to ask. And so while that probably didn't answer the question the way he intended, we answered the question the way it was asked.
Were you on the call with Reggie during the review?
No, our current policy is that the pool reporter submits the question to the referee. He then sends it forward to the conference office.
Right.
And then we send it back to, I had a conversation with Reggie. We're very clear that the only thing we can talk about is rules, not judgment. And so I just made it clear to Reggie that he was to quote the rule that was questioned and not judgment. And so it's difficult for the referees because we understand that media wants all aspects covered, but under our current policy, we just address the rule that was questioned.
All right, and finally, my man Barry Trammell, who I love, who y'all hate, whatever, asked what I thought was a good question. Why did it take twice as long as it normally does? That was his follow-up to his original question of, hey, look, did you guys see forced touching? Did you guys see the ball get smacked by an OU player? Because we didn't. To which Greg Burks gave the appropriate answer, I thought, and we'll follow that up with why it took 3 minutes as opposed to the 90 seconds for which they try to keep these two.
Barry, if we didn't have actual film, we wouldn't have changed the ruling. We couldn't assume. So we had, we attempt to have replay done in a minute and a half just for the good of the game. This one took 3 minutes, and it was because we were making sure that we had a touch and we had a clear shot of the ball hitting the Oklahoma player and then changing direction almost 90 degrees and shooting up the field.
Why the extra time, the twice as long? Is that just because of the importance of the play at this nature in the game and wanting to make sure you got it right?
Yeah, getting the clear shot, making sure we had every shot from TV. When we have a national game like that and we have so many TV angles, we wanted to make sure we got this one absolutely right.
All right, my personal opinion on all of this stuff is quite simple. The referees did the best they could. They understand in this particular instance that the Big 12 was on display on ABC. They also understand that this call was heavily scrutinized and continues to be heavily scrutinized. I mean, I made a friggin' video about a phantom touch here now, guys. And this is not the Oregon game. The Oregon game, officials were flat wrong. In this game, the officials actually got this right. But more to the point, you lose by 7 to Kansas State. You get 48 dropped on you. You deserve what you get. I, again, could care less. But there was no forced touching. It was an illegal touch by Trajan Bridges. The ball did belong to Kansas State, and the game's over. So is this video. Doses.